Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Age of AI, our series covering the rapid evolution of the AI landscape, exploring what's now, what's next, and how that impacts the world of business, the workplace, individuals, and more. I'm your host, Shelley Kramer, Principal Analyst here at Kramer& Company. Today, we are diving into one of the most compelling and complex topics shaping enterprise tech, Agentic AI. We'll talk agentic AI as it relates to security operations, the security implications of agentic AI, convergence, and we'll explore thoughts on what's ahead on the operational front. I'm joined today by Dr. Phil T., who's the EVP and Head of AI Innovations at Zscaler. Phil, welcome. I'm so glad to have you.
Yeah, thrilled to be here, actually, Shelley. Thanks for inviting me over.
Absolutely. Well, Phil and I had a chance to spend some time together at Zscaler Zenith Live about a month or so ago, and I talked him into joining me here because I wanted the chance to introduce him to all of you. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation, Phil. And to set the stage a little bit, we're going to explore what agentic really means beyond the buzzwords and whether what we're seeing today is just a mashup of rules and LLMs or if it's something more transformative. And I say that knowing the answer is definitely the latter. But from security implications and operational risks to the growing convergence of SecOps and IT ops, and we'll look at structural changes that agentic AI is forcing across the enterprise. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation. And most importantly, we're going to talk about what's coming. Will LLMs quietly evolve, or are we on the cusp of a full-blown revolution in how AI agents drive outcomes across our environments? So with all of that, Phil, you ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's get going.
Let's get going. Okay, I always like to start these shows with a simple question. A simple request, actually. Will you walk us through a little bit of your career journey or backstory, if you will?
Yeah, sure. And unfortunately, with the passing of time, this gets a little bit longer to tell us. But there you go. Better than the alternative, as my dad used to say.
Correct.
So my career has been accidental in so many ways. I mean, I actually started out as an academic, as a theoretical physicist, and the irony of it is that never leaves you. I still play with that. I've got a couple of academic affiliations, both with ASU and the University of Sussex in the UK, where I still do some work with colleagues. But I kind of got into the IT industry originally in the IT operations space, largely because there is a sort of a crossover between trying to make sense of the universe with maths versus trying to make sense of a complex infrastructure with maths. And I was very lucky to have a quite a long startup career. Going back to the early 1990s, where I co-founded a company called Micromuse. They went public on NASDAQ, and essentially there's a product there called NetCall that I wrote in my bedsits a long time ago. And what that does is that kind of kicks off the domino effect of everything that you do. And I did a bunch of startups after that, including Riversoft, which was another play in IT ops, again algorithmically trying to get at the root cause analysis problem. And then really in the 2000s, I'd had a background in AI. As a maths guy, it's a sort of a natural gravitation for me to that kind of space. But what really started to kick off in the mid 2000s was a reemergence of statistical approaches to neuro-linguistic reasoning and NLP that ultimately, of course, takes you all the way to generative AI and transformer models today. And so I started an incubator with a friend of mine that was looking to take those sort of new generation of AI algorithms into the enterprise in the late 2000s. And what spun out of that was a company called Moogsoft that I was running until 2023, when that was acquired by Dell Technologies. And after a brief stay there, that's where my entry into Zscaler happened, because Zscaler is this very intriguing company. Obviously, what we're known for is zero trust networking, right. And the company itself has been phenomenally successful with this. It's an incredible product, and I'm not here to do a sales job on Zscaler, but one of the factors of its success is that we actually see more traffic on the internet than Google. We secure like 500 billion transactions a day. And as a side effect of that, we generate an incredible data set here at Zscaler. And that's what I joined to leverage. When I got to know
Mhm.
Jay, through a mutual contact, what he described to me was this incredible data asset and a real intent to want to be at the leading edge of how AI is applied to that. So I joined to start a new organization inside of Zscaler, almost like a startup within an existing company, to try and leverage that. And I'm a technical guy. I still write code, I still design algorithms, I still publish papers, but I'm also a business guy with CEO MOOCs. Also, I'm perfectly happy, sort of in sales calls and dealing with the sort of the business side of things as well. But what's really cool here is the mission is very clear. It's disrupt. It's build a team of data scientists and AI experts to do that. And I think we're in a unique position to do it. So, and
Yeah.
of course, fun other facts. Obviously, you can probably tell by the accent that I'm originally British, but I've been in the US now 13 years, proud citizen, family's over here, and that's been a hell of a journey for me as well. Really, initially California, and now the Garden State, New Jersey, which, contrary to all common opinion, is beautiful and an amazing place to live.
I grew up in Rockland County, New York, which is a hop,
Right.
skip, and a jump away from New Jersey. So I'm well aware of how beautiful the Garden State is, and I also laugh because when you say you're from New York, people assume that you're from Manhattan, and the
Yeah.
area that I grew up is 35 miles north and west as the crow flies from New York City, and to a city dweller, that's oh my gosh, that's upstate, you know,
It
and
really is.
but it's a beautiful area, and so I'm with you on that front. One thing I was thinking about, Phil, when you were talking about your beginnings with Zscaler, I think one of the things that Jay Chaudhry is brilliant at, and I hear this from so many people that I talk with within the organization, is he's absolutely so adept at identifying talent, smart thinkers, and convincing those people to join the team and to work collectively to do some amazing things. And I think that your story absolutely personifies that.
Oh, he's very persuasive. But there's a lot of other human aspects about Jay. I mean, I could wax lyrical about Jay for a long time.
Right,
But he's loved by the company in general, but the technical people in particular here,
right.
because he's smart enough to understand the value of innovation and know how he can best facilitate that inside of the business. So he gives people a lot of runway, a lot of leeway to get stuff done.
Yeah,
And it's funny because in a sense, he and I have walked a fairly similar path, and he gets how hard it is. He
yeah,
understands how hard it is to innovate and disrupt, and appreciates people who are passionate about innovating and disrupting.
yeah, yeah. Hire smart people,
Mhm.
trust in their abilities, get out of their way, support them when you need to. I mean, that's a really great formula for leadership success, I think.
Yeah, it is. 100%.
Absolutely. All right, Phil. Well, let's start by level setting a little bit. Okay. There is obviously a lot of noise about agentic AI. But as we peel back the layers here, many agentic models are really just a blend of deterministic rules and LLMs. Is that enough, or are we still scratching the surface of what true autonomy looks like?
So I think it's kind of important to be precise around what we mean. There are agents and there's agentic,
Yeah.
and there are subtle differences. And I like to think of it as an evolution from simple large language models all the way through to how you deploy them at the enterprise. So
Yeah.
obviously everybody's super familiar with large language models. Everybody knows how to use OpenAI and Anthropic and all the rest of that kind of stuff. You go in, you ask a question, and magically it gives you this answer. And most of the time, it's great. Most of the time, the answer is pretty accurate. But of course, they hallucinate, they make mistakes, and very importantly, they've got a training boundary. And essentially, what that means is, there is a cutoff date for the data that is used to condition and train the model. and anything that is beyond that cutoff date, the model doesn't know about. So
Right.
if you've got a large language model that was trained until September of last year, and you ask it who the president of the United States is, it will tell you Joe Biden. It doesn't know about Donald Trump yet. That surprise is coming for it when it next gets trained.
Right.
So, so that's, one of the obvious limitations. And, people tried to blow past that with RAG style architectures where you automatically generate a contextual prompt. A prompt is just a posh way of saying a very structured question that you
Right.
put into the large language model. And so that allows you to use more current material to do that. So you might go, in a RAG style scenario, format your question about the president by putting in recent news articles. So you blow past the training boundary. But even that, is kind of has its limitations because it's still a static data set talking to another static data set. And it has a kind of an ossified feel to it. So agentic AI or agents and agentic AI evolved to really bring dynamism into the systems that you're building. So the idea is in an agentic system, you have a very special agent. So agents are just basically really Python programs that know how to do one task, and usually in consultation with a language model of some sort, whether it's a foundational model or a local one or wherever it might be. But in an agentic system, there's a very special agent, sometimes referred to as a planner. And what the planner does is when you ask it a question, like you might say, oh, could you submit my expense report for me? What the planner does is it is aware of all of the agents that it knows about. So there may be an agent that knows how to talk to Concur, whatever your expenses system might be. There might be an agent that knows how to, scan receipts in and, turn them into data records. There might be an agent that knows how to put that into a spreadsheet. But the planner is aware of all the agents and tools that it has available and constructs a workflow, a plan of action. How am I going to go about solving this question? And delegates tasks out to other agents, for them to complete. And then once the job is done, we'll summarize the results back to you. And these planners, the sophisticated ones, are capable of replanning. So if they discover something along the way, like there's evidence that you've taken an Uber, but there's not a receipt. You might go, well, I need to go talk to my agent that can talk to the Uber app to go request a receipt. Right. So it can revise its its plan of action on the fly as well. And this builds systems that are, they give the impression of being, quasi-human level capability, right? This is where people get very excited about the idea of agentic AI being able to perform relatively sophisticated tasks. But I'll maybe sort of just take a pause in a second with a final thought, though, that you still have to worry about hallucinations, and that's where the next generation of planners are starting to emerge that do combine the sort of the free-form large language model interrogation, plain text, natural language type reasoning steps with some formal logic, right, so that you can verify the effectiveness of the plan before you start to waste cycles executing it. I don't know whether that was overly high level or overly technical, but I mean that's my best explanation of what agentic is.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's great. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about, the world that both of us live in as, in addition to the world of AI, but security operations, right? And, in security operations, agentic AI is not just a buzzword, it's an operational shift. And I think that, it is a reality that the idea of AI agents independently initiating and analyzing and acting on threats in real time is powerful. But, it also raises a bigger question, and that is, are organizations actually ready to relinquish that level of control at what is still a pretty nascent stage in this age of AI?
Yeah, I mean, you have to bear in mind that there is also a compelling event going on as well, which is, competitive advantage. there's a lot that is spoken, written, talks about, about the advent of, agentic AI and what it's going to do to the nature of work and the nature of business.
Right. Right.
And there's a lot of speculation. What is clear is it's going to be very disruptive, and to the winner the spoils, right? So if you're in a very competitive business, whether it's manufacturing, finance, whatever it might be, one of your competitors is going to figure it out, and is going to
Right.
cut their OPEX in half, double their profit margins, and then you're toast. So regardless as to what your misgivings might be about it as a technology, there is a compulsion to be on the train and be doing stuff. And I would say that there's in the SecOps space, there are two considerations that are separate but related. There is one which is to do with how do I use agentic AI to improve my security posture? How do I make my SecOps more effective?
Right.
And we've got things to say about that, and many more things to say about that coming at Zscaler. Then the other side of things is, does it change the threat landscape? And does it create a new set of attack surfaces that businesses need to be cognizant of? And of course, big shocker, the answer to that is yes.
A resounding yes.
Yeah, it is. And and that presents both challenges and opportunities to companies like Zscaler, to provide solutions to address that. And there's a pitfall in that people fall into, which is they assume that agents are just like people, and to a degree they are. But I'm going to advance maybe a shocking proposition to you. The great thing about cybersecurity is, for the large part, 99.99999% of the human race are good people. We've got a moral compass. We do the right thing. We show up. We don't hack into a high street bank and try and exfiltrate data for ransomware. We don't steal money. We don't do the wrong thing intentionally. So actually, most of what we're having to deal with is a tiny subset of the bad actors. And the other thing about the bad actors is they're human beings. I mean, just like you and I. I mean, there must be days, Shelley, when you turn up to work and you just, I don't feel it today. Well, you know what? Guess what? The hackers are like that too. They're not always on the game, and sort of being creative about how they might effectuate a breach. So they're fallible. They make mistakes. They get tired. They get dispirited. They maybe they become good people and give it the bad stuff. Agents don't have a moral compass. AI doesn't have a moral compass. It doesn't.
They don't have bad days.
Right, wrong, and they never have bad days. They don't tire. They don't get old. They don't sort of lose energy or motivation, and they are 24/7. So you need to think like if the motto of this company is zero trust everywhere, right? It's almost negative trust is what you need, because in an agentic system, your attack surface is bigger. You need to take a different approach. Of course, we're going to argue that the zero trust architecture is actually even more necessary in an agentic framework. And when you're securing protocols like A2A and MCP, the best way to deal with that is, of course, in a reverse proxy, in a proxy kind of way. And we have plenty of customers that we're working with that are sort of taking that view. So there's that, and then of course on the SecOps side, if you think about most root cause analysis processes, most threat detection, most threat and incident management, it's very manual. It's based around a lot of querying, a lot of log analytics. I think agentic is just going to revolutionize that. The idea that you can have continuous, never sleeping root cause analysis going on, so that when an incident does happen, we're already there with a solution and a mitigation or remediation. We understand what the blast radius is. We've contained it. That's coming, and I think that will be quite impactful in terms of how that looks from a cyber point of view.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, a couple of points that you made especially resonated, and we talk about this often, certainly in the security space, but, as excited as we are collectively as a business community and even personally about adopting AI, leveraging AI, getting the benefits that AI can deliver, threat actors are doing the exact same thing. And, AI helps them
Mhm.
launch better attacks, right?
Yeah.
And it
Fine.
helps them be on 24/7. And this is not a situation of, oh, all this AI stuff sounds great. We'll get around to it when we get around to it. It is as you made the point, your competitors are absolutely exploring, if not already using AI and generative AI across their organization. And so there is a competitive situation. But from a security standpoint, you have to realize that that threat actors are as excited about, if not more excited about AI than we are, because
Yeah.
that helps them do one thing: be more successful and make more money.
Yeah, 100%.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's everywhere in the industry at the moment is, particularly in the software development space is, code assistance, right? How do we make our software engineers more productive?
right,
We use AI to do that. Well, guess what? That's, vibe coding, vibe hacking, right? I mean,
right,
and you can do it. I mean, it's in sort of unguardrailed models, you can go and ask them about, vulnerabilities.
right.
And you can just imagine in that sort of darkened basement flat in the suburbs of Moscow, where you got some hacker sort of logged onto OpenAI or probably not OpenAI, probably shouldn't use brand names, but some foundational model, sort of helping them, assisting them
Yeah,
design ransomware and viruses and all the rest of that kind of stuff. That's out there for sure. And what that requires us to do as the quote unquote good guys here is to also use AI,
right.
to stay ahead. And again, that is one of the things that sort of brought me into this team here at Zscaler is
Absolutely.
you feel an obligation to use their skills for good.
Yeah.
Shirley, um, about a month ago, one reason or other, I had to go back through the UK, and uh, and I was meeting a colleague of mine who's actually just over in San Francisco now, or San Jose, seeing us. And it just turned out that given the logistics, the best place for us to meet, because he lives in the wilds of Eastern England, we actually met up at Bletchley Park and spent 6 hours, in a design meeting in one of the cafe rooms there. And Bletchley Park, if you're familiar, is where the Enigma code was decoded
Yeah.
in the World War. So you get to see Alan Turing's office and all the rest of that kind of thing. This is the modern day equivalent here. This is like being drafted into Bletchley Park. We are, using our team's skills and talents to try and do the right thing and keep the enemy out
Yeah.
the gates. And a lot of that is absolutely using AI to help us with threat detection and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I was doing some interviews at RSAC, and I made the comment that, especially for those of us who are old enough to, and
Mhm.
I know that you share this experience with me, but to have navigated life
Mhm.
really before the web, and before the web was ubiquitous, right? And I remember the early days of, I had computers that were, I started out on an IBM correcting selectric typewriter, and so I've had every iteration of computer possible.
Yeah.
And but I remember when I got my first desktop computer, I worked in the agency business, and the only thing I used that computer for was Word,
Yeah.
Microsoft Word, and email. And and when you think about the transformative nature, the
Oh,
transformative power of the internet, and how we worked at one point in time has changed so drastically.
yeah.
And then here we are, and another transformative moment that we're lucky enough to be able to get to navigate through again. And I think, like, I'm such a nerd, like tremendously exciting. And but I made the comment when I was doing an interview that it's one of the most exciting times. And it's also, and the guest that I was interviewing said, and it's also one of the most terrifying.
Yeah, it is the old Chinese curse, isn't it, of may live in interesting times. And you're quite right. We are going through it. And I gave a talk actually at Zenith Live. And as I said to the guys here when we were planning it, I said, look, I'll do the corporate pitch. I said, but I want a slot for me, because I want to tell a story that people need to listen to about, the AI revolution as a parable from the Industrial Revolution. Of course, a lot of people make that, but what they don't focus on is the human aspect of what's going to change here.
Right.
And the story I love to tell is, a few years back, I was on a plane and I was sat next to a lady I was chatting to. She was on her way to a conference on genetics, and we got talking about what she was going there to do. And her research is around the genetics of longevity. And she said this one thing to me, it caused my jaw to drop. She said, the first 200-year-old human being is alive today, walking planet Earth today. And, in the world of AI, when you start thinking about how it can revolutionize, healthcare and drug design and therapeutics, that is going to make it real. And usually what I stop and ask the audience and say to them is like, one of them, that 200-year-old human could be in the room today.
Are you here?
What are you? So let me ask you a question. What are you going to do with the extra 100 years? Think about that. It's like, the arc of productivity. And of course, everybody wants to live forever, but they don't want to get old. So you've got that to worry about. But, the arc of productivity, if you start getting, it's for everybody, but I'm thinking in terms of the human race, the hyper contributors. Imagine what another 50 years of Albert Einstein at his time would have given us, or 50 years of Vera Rubin, or you pick it, and it's just almost incomprehensible to think about what this next 5 generations is going to look like. And the last time that happened was the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. Exciting times for sure.
Yeah, totally. Well, it definitely gets me out of bed in the morning.
It gets me out of bed every morning as well. So, Phil, I know that we agree that with autonomy comes risk. And if an agent can act, it can be exploited. So for our audience, talk with me a little bit about what you think and how you guide customers, and what do business leaders need to be aware of? Where should their focus lie?
Yeah, well, I hate to say that, the first thing to say is people have got to get the basics right. And we definitely bang the drum here about zero trust. It is the right architecture for minimizing your attack surface. And in the world of agentic, that is incredibly important. Your attack surface needs to be really actively managed. There are different types of traffic that you need to be inspecting in novel kinds of ways on your network as well. And of course, what I'm talking about is natural language. So, we're all, this company really came about because some very clever people a long time ago, worked out how to decrypt TLS at line speed. So we can do deep packet inspection of encrypted traffic, which is what makes zero trust networking possible in the modern era. Well, guess what? There's a different type of content now. It's natural language, it's prompts. And you need to be able to look at those prompts, and you need to be able to make assessments quickly as to whether or not that is malicious, whether or not it poses a risk. Are your employees accidentally or intentionally, but usually accidentally, exfiltrating data by sharing sensitive company data with foundational models? And there are well-documented occurrences of that. Is there poor intent in the question? Like, for example, am I trying to use our HR system here to work out how much a colleague makes? Which is clearly, if it's not somebody who I control their compensation, then clearly I'm doing the wrong thing. And that requires a different way of thinking about zero trust. And absolutely, we have brought product to market that helps deal with it. But then there's other things you need to think through in terms of different types of threats. So tool hijacking, prompt poisoning, as ways in which people are going to be able to either get control of your agentic framework in the case of tool hijacking, or in terms of bugs that people might write into things like MCP servers. There's a very high profile issue fairly recently with that. But it starts with getting the basics right. It starts with having a zero trust framework in place. It starts with leaning into thinking about, how do I add additional capability from vendors like us? We're not the only company in the world that helps people with this, but we like to think we're the best. Getting something in there to help you secure the AI traffic on your network, and then using the zero trust approach as the ultimate intermediary for your agentic mesh.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, as expected. So, Phil, one of the things that this is one of the topics that I'm particularly interested in, one of the most important and often overlooked realities today is that SecOps problems show up as observability issues and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, talk with me, if you would, about how organizations need to shift their focus around these two areas.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that I've got a background in IT ops. I mean, that's really what most of my prior career has been involved in, using AI. And the funny thing is that oftentimes data exfiltration, for example, will show up because of an unexpected drop in disk capacity, as an example, which is an observability metric that people may or may not be monitoring. Or it might show up in inexplicable performance slowdowns. And wouldn't it be a shame if those signals were just being overlooked because the SecOps folks are one side of the hall and the IT ops folks are the other? I mean, the long and the short of it is those two worlds are going to coalesce.
They have to.
They 100% have to.
They have to.
And I think that it could well be that AI and agentic in particular is actually an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
In my prior business in Moogsoft, we pioneered AI ops, and the number of times that we were asked as an IT ops vendor, could you replace my SIM because my SIM is rules based and I need something for 0-day attacks. And we did do some of that work. I mean, it was not a focus for us at the time. But, the reason why I bring it up is not to relive the past, but, just to point out that the reason why there was potentially a convergence there was because of the AI in that platform. And I think that it allows you to abstract away from the detail of the SecOps and the IT ops use case into potentially building a common platform to do both. And I will tell you, Shelley, that there are many categorical similarities between IT ops and SecOps, more in common than people might think. And maybe what separates them is what sometimes I like to refer to as the narcissism of small differences, the things that people like to argue about that really have not very much consequence.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think this is a situation where whether or not vendors are ready for this, what customers really need is this unification of security and IT ops, and fragmented tools and reactive models and all of that sort of thing. I think vendors' mindset needs to really focus on what is best for our customers and how can we coalesce to make this happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Phil, we're at an inflection point with LLMs, and I want you to look into your crystal ball. What do you think we can expect in the next I hate to say this. I was going to say 2 to 5 years, but in my mind, 5 years is an eternity. So, what do you think we should expect in the next 2 to 3 years? Incremental advancements in context awareness and memory, or is it something more disruptive on the horizon, like goal-driven, self-improving agents, or is it both? Or is it something completely different?
I've learned to always, underestimate the degree of surprise that you're going to see coming through. And I think you can probably boil it down into, maybe three broad categories of advancement. So, the transformer model, auto-regressive self-attention type approaches, that burst forward in 2017 is really the wave that we're riding. There are going to be some serious advances there. Like, everybody got super excited at the start of the year when DeepSeek came out and showed that they could kind of slash
Right,
training costs by 90%, and it's like, holy cow, where did that come from? Well,
right,
guess what? There are other things that that are going on there. There was a paper I was reading this morning around variable regression, so shrinking the number of layers necessary in a transformer block, but using a recursive approach to attention, where you focus more on the high information content tokens in a stream versus, say, if you think of a sentence, do you really need to, put the through the same level of abstraction and recursion in the transformer block as, say, rhinoplasty, a word you might not hear quite so much. So you're going to see really slick improvements in the transformer technology, which could radically shrink the amount of compute, training cost, get gain of function in the technology. So it's kind of a better version of a mousetrap.
right.
And that's going to go on, and it could be quite impactful because, one of the things that is definitely a gating factor on agentic AI, for example, is, the cost of reasoning loops. How long does it
Absolutely.
take?
It's a huge issue.
Well, imagine you shrink that down from, 30 seconds to 30 milliseconds,
Wow.
and all of a sudden, agentic AI is in every application there is across there. And you could imagine a world where, the agentic OS becomes real, which means that you don't really ever interact with enterprise software anymore. An agent does that on your behalf, and it's much
Right.
more, right? So that's one category. And I would say that is deeply impactful, kind of dull. Because I lived as an early physicist through the string theory revolution, where the air was sucked out of the room by string theory and nothing else was funded. And in a sense, transformer technology is doing that in NLP.
Right.
The next thing is, well, how about different models? How about different approaches to, because at the end of the day, that's probabilistic modeling. Are there other alternative non-transformer models that, may emerge that, radically improve the inferencing capabilities of that layer? And, I start to think about, you know, the transformer at its heart is linear algebra, but the way in which they string the linear algebra together kind of mimics a non-linearity. So use of things like shortcuts and dropouts and so on and so forth turns a linear flow into a non-linear flow or recursive flow. But it's such a pity in some sense that people weren't paying attention in the last 2 years of the maths classes, because linear algebra is kind of dull. Maybe there are other ways of doing, sort of regression and training that rely upon more advanced maths. And there
Right.
are people that are looking at things like, fixed weight learn activation functions. So that, in a sense, is turning linear algebra into curvilinear algebra. And, maybe there is a way in which you can, improve the gain of function there. I was in a bar last night talking to somebody about this. Fortunately, they're also a nerd, so I wasn't bored.
We
But
we nerds tend to hang out together.
saying, if you exactly, if for a reason, if you think about the dimension of an embedding space, okay, the way in which embedding spaces work is they use dot products as a way of sort of working out cosine similarity. It's a way of working out whether one vector is similar to another. But if you change the space that the embedding space lives in, it all gets a little bit meta. So instead of doing a dot product that is flat, you do a dot product in curve space. You could actually get the same amount of information into a vector space, which is the square root of its dimension, which is a radical reduction in the dimensionality. And everybody knows about the curse of dimensionality. High dimension spaces are sparse, and that's where some of the root cause of the hallucinations you get there. I think that is, there may be a revolution in how that works. Then the last thing I would point to is quantum and quantum analog. Because, and I have this argument as well, and it boils down to, by the way, is mathematics invented or discovered? And by somebody's answer, I can tell whether or not they go to church, theoretically. Because if you believe mathematics is discovered, you're basically saying that there's a higher being out there somewhere. But anyway, back to the plot. Quantum and quantum analog computing, what that may give us is it may give us novelty, because for all of the this, that, and the other of NLP and large language models and agentic and so on and so forth, it's not doing intelligence like you're intelligent, Shelley. It's not capable of the leaps of abstraction that human intelligence just kind of routinely does. And maybe the missing thing, maybe the clue is, if you think about the energy consumption of executing a prompt, right? If you think about how much power is consumed, you can outthink the hundreds of megawatts of OpenAI with the 4 watts of fatty gray stuff between your ears. So your brain is doing something different to a computer. Maybe we can work out how we can harness that. And here's the thing, your brain is a quantum computer.
It is.
It is doing quantum mechanics. That's how it works. So, maybe there is quantum analog that is going to revolutionize. But then you have a philosophical question to answer. Are we, as human intelligences, capable of creating an intelligence greater than our own? And, I don't have the answer to that. I'd like to believe the answer is no. But maybe, just maybe, if, we keep on eating a high fiber diet and keeping a watch on our calories, we might live long enough to find out the answer to that.
Well, I'm with you on that front. It will be very interesting to watch what's ahead.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Phil, as we wrap this episode, I'd like to ask you to leave us with one bit of advice for business leaders who are trying to get a handle on security operations in the age of agentic AI. Where do they focus? Where do they start? What is there to be leery of? Whatever piece of advice you want to leave us with, I would love to hear it.
Get your teams investigating it. Be a learning mindset, be a disruption mindset, and just make sure that you internalize the fact that what you did last year ain't going to cut it for the next 5. Be prepared to be fleet of foot.
I love it. I think that's great advice. Dive in, don't wait.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of The Age of AI. I'm your host, Shelley Kramer, Principal Analyst at Kramer&Co. Special thanks to my delightful guest, Dr. Phil Smith, Head of AI Innovations at Zscaler. And also thank you to our audience for joining us today. And if you've not yet hit that subscribe button, now is the perfect time to do it. And we'll see you here next time. Thanks again, Phil.